To save my fiancée, I suffered severe burns all over my body. Yet, she turned around and married my illegitimate half-brother. As I was left to starve slowly in the basement, they were exchanging wedding rings at their lavish ceremony. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back at the moment the fire started. Faced with Nadia Jenkins' desperate cries for help from the inferno, I chose to remain unmoved. I even took the liberty of closing the escape door. This time, let you be forever locked together with my illegitimate half-brother. Scott, save me. Please, I'm begging you. Save me. Ding. Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. Smoke billowed and flames raged as I stood there, suddenly realizing everything. I had been reborn. Reborn at the very moment this nightmare was just beginning. In my previous life, I had rushed into the inferno to save Nadia, disregarding everything else. Even as the ceiling collapsed, I had used my own body to protect her. The result? I suffered severe burns over 80% of my body, my face completely disfigured. And Nadia? She only sustained minor injuries. Afterwards, she knelt by my hospital bed, swearing to take care of me for the rest of our lives. But as soon as she turned away, she married my illegitimate half-brother. My family gradually grew to despise me, this cripple directing all their affection towards that bastard. In the end, they locked me in the basement and left me to starve to death. Scott, I'm so scared. Please come and save me. Nadia's cries for help continued. Meanwhile, the fire grew more intense. The building kept making bone-chilling cracking sounds. Faced with all this, I unhesitatingly rushed towards the emergency exit, leaving her behind to cry and beg for help. Serve you right. This is your comeuppance. Without me shielding her, this woman was destined to pay the price for her hypocrisy. When I learned about Nadia's condition at the hospital, she was already on the brink of death, clinging to life. I heard that after multiple resuscitation attempts, they barely managed to keep her alive. Of course, she was barely living. Burns covered over 70% of her body, her face completely ruined, and she was likely to be paralyzed for life. Upon hearing this news, I almost laughed out loud, having to pretend to cover my mouth in grief. Serves you right, you damn. On the surface, I acted as if my heart had been cut out, as if I was in unbearable pain. I perfectly played the role of the devoted boyfriend. As for Nadia's parents, they too were devastated upon seeing their daughter's miserable state, fainting repeatedly. They spared no expense in bringing in various experts for consultations, but the conclusions were all the same. Nadia would be nothing but a vegetable for the rest of her life. Not only that, but she would also completely lose her ability to bear children. Well, her lower body was badly burned. With her uterus gone, what could one expect? Hearing this, Mr. Jenkins collapsed on the spot, passing out. The Jenkins family, known for their academic heritage, valued the continuation of their bloodline above all else. Now they were left with Nadia as their only daughter. With Nadia in this state, it meant their family line would end with her. That very night, the Jenkins parents began researching the possibility of surrogacy. This reaction was all too familiar to me. People are like that. The grief is real, but it doesn't last forever. They always find new attachments and substitutes. In my previous life, after I was severely burned, my father initially didn't comment on the matter. But later, with no one to take over the company, he had no choice but to accept the illegitimate son from a one-night stand years ago as his heir. That lad was diligent and clever, handsome too, completely fitting my father's image of an ideal son. In the end, even when Nadia decided to marry him, my father and the family actually agreed to it. They gave all their love to that bastard, even everything that once belonged to me. At first, I didn't blame him. But after experiencing Harry's schemes and setups time and time again, I finally saw the true face of this ungrateful fellow. He would always come to see me, pretending to care, and leave with a guilty sigh. When others asked, he would say, "Don't blame my brother. I'm the one who doesn't deserve this family. I've taken everything from my brother. This is what I deserve to bear. He liked to flaunt in front of me how much Nadia depended on him, how much she doted on him, forcing me to look at their intimate photos one by one. The more pain I was in, the more pleased Harry became. And Nadia, the woman I had desperately saved, she actually condoned all of this. I even found out later that the idea of my father accepting his illegitimate son was her suggestion, and that illegitimate son was personally introduced to my father by her. At that time, I suspected that this couple might have been in cahoots for a long time. But back then, I had neither the energy nor the ability to investigate. But this time, I will make sure all the hidden truths come to light. After returning from the hospital, I drove home. My parents visibly relaxed when they saw me back safely. Like Nadia, I'm also an only child. If it weren't for this, that illegitimate child wouldn't have had a chance. Dad, Mom, even though Nadia is in this condition now, I will never give up on her. I'll stay by her side and wait until she gets better before making any plans. Hearing this, my father's face lit up with a gratified smile, nodding repeatedly. Our family and the Jenkins have been friends for generations. It would be unthinkable to abandon Nadia at a time like this. Son, you've grown up. It's time for you to start taking over the company. He looked at me with approval. In his eyes, I was his pride. I'd always been a good student, smart and capable. With an exceptional business acumen, I always stood out in high society circles. That's why he couldn't accept the fact of my disability. He'd rather exhaust all resources to groom that illegitimate child to replace me, regaining his sense of superiority. In my father's mind, that feeling of superiority was indispensable. But the person who could bring him this feeling could be replaced at any time. A month passed in the blink of an eye, and Nadia still showed no signs of waking up. But I visited her punctually every day, taking meticulous care of her. Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins were deeply moved by my unwavering dedication, and they sent me many precious gifts, both openly and discreetly. And of course, I accepted them all. Naturally, these gifts came at a price. Watching Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins grow thinner day by day, I really couldn't bear it. The next day, I took them to the children's home. Why don't we consider adopting a child? Faced with my sincere proposal, they stood there stunned, unable to speak for a good while. Of course, I understood what they were thinking. Although they were shocked, confused, and hesitant, there was definitely no intention of refusal. I had already found out everything. Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins' IVF treatments hadn't been successful, and their age and physical conditions no longer allowed for it. This matter had been worrying them, and they had already been privately considering adoption. They had no choice but to adopt. All of Mr. Jenkins' cousins were eyeing the Jenkins family fortune. Rather than letting these greedy relatives succeed, it would be better to adopt a sensible child who at least knows gratitude. The only worry was that Nadia might be unhappy if she woke up, thinking it showed a lack of loyalty to adopt now. But none of this mattered, because I was here. Please don't rush to refuse. This suggestion isn't just for my own sake, but also for Nadia's. Nadia is so filial. How could she bear to see you two grow old alone with no one to take care of you? My eyes moistened as I led Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins into the children's home. Although they said they didn't want to, their gaze was deeply drawn to those innocent and lively children. Their eyes gradually revealed kindness and expectation. They could no longer utter words of refusal. Finally, they began to discuss with me which child was the cutest. After spending a morning choosing, they went home contentedly with a thick stack of files to study. Things progressed very quickly. Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins finally adopted a 6-year-old boy, naming him Abe. They even held a grand adoption ceremony, inviting many high society families. On the day of the party, someone privately remarked that Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins were too heartless, thinking about adopting an outsider when their daughter wasn't even dead yet. They were unfit to be parents. I immediately retorted, "Shut up. Outsiders shouldn't comment carelessly." This was entirely my suggestion to the elderly couple. I'm Nadia's fiancée. Since she's had an accident, it's my duty to be filial on her behalf. Seeing the elderly couple so distraught breaks my heart. Why not adopt a child to cheer them up? If Nadia wakes up, she'd surely support my idea. I spoke forcefully and righteously. On stage, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins' eyes were moist, constantly wiping away tears. With my backing, everything went smoothly afterwards. As I was leaving, Mrs. Jenkins held me back again, handing me several sets of keys and property deeds. Together, they were worth over £100 million. On the way home, a sudden turn of events shattered the tranquility. A young man suddenly stood in front of the gate of my mansion, blocking the car that was about to enter. The driver was caught off guard and slammed on the brakes. The two of us in the car lurched forward due to inertia. As the dizziness gradually subsided, I opened the car door. That familiar yet strange handsome face came into view, and I gave a cold smirk. "Harry, how are you?" When Harry saw me get out of the car, he looked as shocked as if he'd seen a ghost. His face turned pale as he shouted, "Scott Lawrence, you're actually alive. Weren't you burned into a vegetative state?" As soon as he finished speaking, Wesley Howard immediately stepped forward to drive him away, angrily rebuking. Where did this madman come from? Blocking the car and cursing our young master, truly suicidal. But Harry pushed Wesley aside forcefully, rushing to the front of the car and banging on it frantically, shouting hoarsely, "Dad, it's me. I'm your and Linda's child. Don't you remember me? Please, just look at me once." My father, still shaken, stared at Harry's out-of-control behavior in bewilderment, completely at a loss. Seeing that Wesley had already restrained Harry, my father hurriedly opened the car door and grabbed my arm, pulling me into the car. As he ran, he anxiously shouted, "Scott, get in the car quickly. This person has gone mad." These words were undoubtedly a bolt from the blue for Harry, and his eyes immediately reddened. He continued to plead frantically, constantly recalling moments he had shared with my father. However, all he received in return was my father's assessment of him as a lunatic. When had Harry, who was doted on by my father in his previous life, ever suffered such an insult? Even as the car drove into the villa and the gate slowly closed, Harry's heart-wrenching cries still echoed in the courtyard, the sound so shrill it was chilling. My father naturally didn't take this small incident to heart, treating it as merely an encounter with a mentally unstable person. But I saw everything clearly. Harry had also been reborn, like me, with memories of his previous life. According to the trajectory of the last life, this should have been the time when Nadia introduced him to meet my parents for the first time. But now everything had changed. The one lying on the hospital bed, barely clinging to life, had become Nadia. No one could continue to act as a go-between for him anymore. Moreover, the news of Nadia's severe injury had been tightly concealed by the Jenkins family. Harry, an ordinary student, had no way of knowing the truth. So he panicked and recklessly blocked the car, hoping to re-enter my father's line of sight. A few days later, the investigation report on Nadia and Harry was delivered to me. A thick stack of papers. It detailed the clandestine love story between these two. They had met 2 years ago. A young lady from a wealthy family and a hard-working, ambitious poor student. Within days, they had taken a liking to each other. At that time, Nadia was still dating me. On the surface, we were inseparable, but in reality, she was secretly colluding with Harry. Nadia wanted Harry to take my place. But a poor boy like Harry, no matter how smart and capable, could never be accepted by the Jenkins family. So in my previous life, after I was severely injured, she quickly arranged a forged paternity test. Using the excuse of taking care of my father, she used Harry to replace my position. She found a perfect family for the white knight in her heart. Even more ironically, a year ago, Nadia had already asked Harry to start imitating my gestures and behavior. Even many of my business ideas and innovations, Harry could perfectly replicate. Seeing this, I suddenly suspected that even if I hadn't sacrificed myself in that fire to save her, Nadia would have found a way to get Harry into my family. Of course, the prerequisite would be to create some accidents to make me die or become disabled. But I'm not in a hurry to expose the conspiracy of these two, nor am I in a hurry to take revenge on Harry. After all, the time isn't right. The suffering I endured in my previous life, they won't escape any of it. 2 weeks later, news came from the hospital. Nadia Jenkins had woken up. At that time, I was at the Jenkins house, having tea with Mrs. Jenkins and bringing some toys for Abe. Mrs. Jenkins, upon hearing the news, was surprised with a hint of unease. She held Abe for a long while, unable to speak. Understandably so. After all, Nadia had been in a coma for so long that even the doctors had lost hope. They thought she would likely spend the rest of her life as a vegetable. No one expected her to wake up. "Don't worry, Mrs. Jenkins. Nadia is a good daughter. She'll understand your situation," I reassured her. "Besides, Abe is such a lovely and sensible boy. She's bound to like him. I'll be there to help with everything." With my reassurance, Mrs. Jenkins hurriedly left for the hospital. As it turned out, anyone who learns they've become disabled and that their parents have quickly adopted another child would go mad. The scene in the hospital room was even more out of control than I had imagined. Nadia was frantically smashing everything within reach, her face contorted with rage. "You're all monsters. I'm not even dead yet, and you've brought home some little bastard. The Jenkins estate is mine. No one else can have it." This terrified Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins, especially young Abe, who had just been brought over to meet her. Despite his young age and being frightened himself, he didn't back away. Instead, he stood bravely in front of Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins. "Don't be scared, Mom and Dad. Abe will protect you." In that moment, the couple was moved to tears. After a few hasty words, they left with Abe. As they turned to leave, all that remained was cold indifference. Nadia sat stunned on the hospital bed, her mind in a fog. She couldn't understand how a newly adopted son could so quickly take away everything she had. The answer was obvious, though. It was all because of Abe. The boy was nothing short of a prodigy among prodigies. His language skills were astounding. He could communicate fluently in French within weeks. In the arts, he showed even more remarkable talent. At the adoption ceremony, he casually played a piece on the piano that left the music masters present in awe. A renowned pianist even offered on the spot to take him as his sole disciple. As soon as he started school, he mastered courses meant for older students, scoring perfect marks on every test. He quickly became the talk of high society, the child genius everyone spoke of. During this time, he had brought much pride to Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins. And Nadia? She spent her days throwing tantrums, venting her frustrations on everyone around her, and now she was disabled. It was truly disheartening. "Nadia, can't you grow up a bit?" I said, as the only person who had stayed behind. "Have you ever thought about how much Uncle and Aunt have sacrificed for you all these years? How much pain they've endured?" My face filled with disappointment as I continued. "If it weren't for Abe's arrival, they would have fallen apart long ago. Do you want to watch them crumble before your very eyes?" With these words, I stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind me. Immediately after, her hysterical cries echoed from within. I leaned against the door outside, listening to her sobs, feeling an indescribable sense of satisfaction. Don't think me heartless. This was merely a reenactment of what she had done to me in my previous life. Back then, I was the one lying in a hospital bed, watching my parents and Harry Lawrence getting along so well, as if I didn't even exist. And Nadia, seeing my unhappy expression, immediately started berating me, saying I was narrow-minded and unfilial, claiming that by not accepting Harry, I was driving my parents to their deaths. I was desperate and panicked at the time. The truth was, my facial nerves had died, and I could no longer make any expressions. But no one was willing to listen to me. Nadia simply left with my parents, saying they needed to let me reflect on my behavior. Did anyone care about my inner turmoil? At least the current Nadia could still speak and move. Her upper body was still functional. In my previous life, I was completely paralyzed. Except for my eyes and mouth, I couldn't move anything. The pain I endured was far greater than what she's experiencing now. After I left, Nadia Jenkins continued to cause a commotion for several days. At first, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins still loved their daughter dearly. But Nadia couldn't control her emotions and kept insulting Abe. Gradually, her parents became utterly disappointed in her. They stopped visiting her at the hospital, saying they were giving Nadia time to calm down and recover. They specifically instructed the hospital and caregivers to prohibit any visitors, fearing Nadia might reveal secrets that could affect the Jenkins family's reputation. I, however, was the only person allowed to come and go freely, because I had already put down roots in the Jenkins family. Not only did Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins treat me like their own son, but even Abe was particularly close to me, always smiling and calling me brother. Mrs. Jenkins often held my hand and rambled on, saying, "Scott, when this is all over, I'll officially make you my godson. You've always been such a good lad." Everyone understood without saying a word. Considering Nadia's current condition, she was unlikely to find a good match in life. How could a wealthy young man like me be willing to take care of her for the rest of her life? What I was doing now was already above and beyond. Mrs. Jenkins took the initiative to adopt me as her godson. This way, they could maintain a close relationship while avoiding potential problems in the future. In the following days, I went to the hospital rain or shine. Every time I saw Nadia, I would scold her for being inconsiderate and narrow-minded. Then I would leave. Day after day, Nadia finally broke down. She tried every way to bribe the nurses to contact someone, Harry Lawrence, the person she loved most. As soon as Harry received the news, he rushed to the hospital. Seeing Nadia's disfigured face on the hospital bed, he covered his mouth in horror, tears streaming down his face. "Nadia, what on earth happened? Don't scare me." Harry never imagined it would turn out like this. How could this happen when I was supposed to be protecting Nadia? It's all because of that bastard Scott Lawrence. He left me to die and ran away to save himself. If it weren't for him, how could I have ended up like this? After hearing Nadia's words, Harry was stunned for a long time before finally understanding the truth. Then, he told Nadia about his experience of being reborn and the events of his previous life. The two analyzed the situation for a long time. In the end, they came to a bitter conclusion. Their current predicament was all my doing. Why wasn't I willing to take the risk to save Nadia? It was because I was too selfish. They must get revenge on me, take back everything they had lost. Watching this scene through the surveillance camera, I couldn't help but sneer. Indeed, there's a reason why a vile woman matches a scumbag man. They're both utterly shameless. Soon, Nadia began to implement her plan. She suddenly changed her behavior, becoming quiet and well-behaved. When I came to visit, she would even force a smile, as if nothing had happened. Seeing her like this, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins eventually softened their hearts and began to visit her at the hospital from time to time. Of course, their little darling Abe was always the pride of his parents. Every time they mentioned this child, they couldn't stop praising him. "Nadia, look at Abe, he's such a prodigy. He got first place in the exams again and even played the piano for us when he came home. When Abe becomes successful in the future, he surely won't forget about you." Whenever these moments occurred, Nadia's face would turn as if someone had spilled a palette of colors, barely suppressing the rage in her heart. Although she outwardly agreed and praised Abe, inside she wanted nothing more than to tear him to pieces. A month later, Nadia Jenkins finally couldn't bear it anymore. She hastily poured out her heart. "Mom, Dad, I want to marry Scott Lawrence. I know I'm not good enough for him now, but I promise I'll work hard to become better. Our love is genuine. Scott won't abandon me." As soon as these words left her mouth, the room suddenly fell silent. Seeing no response, Nadia gritted her teeth and threatened. If they didn't agree, she'd jump from the hospital roof, especially when I pushed open the door and came in. She immediately grabbed my wrist, insisting that I accompany her to the register office. She had even set the wedding date. The hospital corridor quickly filled with people. People were gossiping, and some were even live streaming with their phones. They shouted loudly, saying Nadia ended up like this because she saved me. The implication was that if I didn't agree to marry her, I'd be an ungrateful wretch. Nadia's acting skills exploded as she suddenly picked up a scalpel, pointing it at her wrist. Scott, saving you was my choice. I don't want to force you. I'll end my life right now. This scene caused the onlookers to criticize me. This man is so heartless. He's absolutely cold-blooded. It's just marriage, what's the big deal? She saved your life, you know? As the situation became more chaotic, Mr. Jenkins, who had been silent, finally spoke up. He snatched the knife from Nadia's hand and roared, "Stop it. Your mother and I already consider Scott as our adopted son. You're siblings now. Stop pursuing him." Mr. Jenkins suddenly realized. Nadia had been so well-behaved lately, coaxing them into removing all the caregivers. It was all for this show today. Many of those onlookers were also prearranged by her. Then Mrs. Jenkins couldn't help but say painfully, "Nadia, dear, not only is your appearance damaged now, but your ability to have children is also in question. If you insist on marrying Scott, aren't you harming him? This would make him unable to have children." At this moment, a cry of shock erupted from the crowd of onlookers. This girl can't have children in the future? So she's a hen that can't lay eggs and still wants to get married? Isn't this intentionally deceiving people? At least her parents are sensible and considering the young man's future. Nadia's face turned pale, her whole body trembling as she clenched her fists tightly. She wanted to disappear right away. As a woman, having her most private matters discussed in public was an extreme humiliation. What was even more unacceptable was that it was her godmother who revealed this. Anyone would find it hard to bear, wouldn't they? Just as public opinion was almost unanimous. Suddenly, someone stood up to defend Nadia, saying righteously, "They don't have to get married, but she became like this to save you. There should be some compensation. At least half of the family property should be given to her." And Nadia, she met my gaze, a cold smile appearing at the corner of her mouth. She was clearly convinced that there were no cameras or witnesses at the fire scene, which is why she dared to fabricate the lie about saving me. She had made the first move. Even if I denied it, I would be seen as ungrateful. Either way, she would be the winner. Nadia seized the opportunity, exaggerating how I had collapsed from the thick smoke and how she had risked her life to carry me out of the fire. And because of this, she lost her chance to escape. This touching narrative moved many people present to tears. Just then, a group of reporters suddenly burst into the ward, immediately surrounding me when they saw me. "Mr. Lawrence, can we have an interview? What made you so brave to rush into the fire multiple times to save people? Mr. Lawrence, will you attend the city's award ceremony?" Everyone in the hospital room looked at each other in confusion. A journalist opened their phone to check the headlines on major news platforms. They were all about Scott Lawrence. Heir to fortune braves fire, rescues multiple citizens. Survivors share videos thanking courageous young man. Hero revealed as son of prominent local entrepreneur. And so on. Next to the eye-catching red headlines were my on-scene photos and videos. In the footage, I moved swiftly, relying on my professional judgment of building structures and fire patterns, disregarding my own safety. Time and again, I rushed into the depths of the fire, carrying or supporting over a dozen lives to safety. Even with my body covered in soot, I never hesitated. Only when the firefighters arrived did I quietly leave. Although the CCTV footage was somewhat blurry, it clearly recorded everything. At this moment, everyone's gaze inevitably focused on Nadia Jenkins. It was clear to all, in my current condition, why would I need her to rescue me? Moreover, didn't she say I was unconscious at the time? Then who was that lively figure in the surveillance footage? Was it a ghost possessing my body? Nadia's face turned pale, her body trembling involuntarily. After a long while, she stammered, I might have remembered it wrong." As soon as these words left her mouth, the scene erupted into chaos. Nadia's parents felt ashamed. glaring at their disgraceful daughter with anger. On the drive home, I opened my phone's browser. As I expected, the internet was flooded with accusations against Nadia's deceitful behavior. Everything that happened in the hospital room was live-streamed in real time. The people Nadia had invited quickly cut off the broadcast when they saw the situation turning against her. But the team I hired persisted until the very end. I had specifically upgraded my internet plan just to fully record this spectacular scene. Indeed, I was well aware of Nadia's every little move. The surveillance equipment wasn't just for show. Every twist in today's drama was under my control. Nadia's parents siding with me was expected. Besides our years of friendship, it was because I exposed Nadia's true face. She not only tried to frame me, but also secretly sold Jenkins Group's trade secrets to competitors. All to get revenge on her parents. Under these circumstances, Nadia's parents couldn't wait to cut ties with her, let alone help me with this small favor. As for the fire rescue, every detail happened exactly as reported. At that time, I shook off Nadia and saw the raging fire and panicking people. My heart clenched tightly. Recalling my past life's struggle for survival in a great fire, I knew too well that feeling of desperation. I had to save them. I had attended fire safety training and was in good physical shape. With the experience from my rebirth, I rushed into the fire without hesitation. Even when choked by smoke and burned by flames, I gritted my teeth and persevered. I didn't want others to follow in my footsteps and endure such suffering. After the rescue, I quietly left. It wasn't that I was particularly noble, I just felt that taking credit for good deeds should be timed right. Like now, speaking of Harry Lawrence, he's still in the detention center waiting for bail. That's what he gets for believing Nadia's words and trying to steal Jenkins Group's trade secrets. Mr. Jenkins was truly angry this time and had already instructed his lawyer to show no leniency. His attitude was very firm. Given Harry's actions, even though unsuccessful, he could face severe punishment if convicted. But I no longer have time to worry about these matters. Because next, my schedule is packed full. The media frenzy was in full swing, with interview requests pouring in and TV appearances lined up one after another. Company affairs were also piling up relentlessly, all because of this heroic deed. The stock price was soaring, pushing the company's market value to an all-time high. My father had long planned to gradually hand over the reins of the company to me. My mother, meanwhile, was busy attending various social events, beaming with pride every time someone praised me. But the most surprising turn of events was yet to come. Mr. Jenkins, to show his gratitude, had reclaimed all the shares from Nadia's possession. He even allocated some to me, calling it a welcome gift for accepting me as his godson. This golden period didn't last long. News came from the detention center about Harry Lawrence. Harry and Nadia had a child together. That wasn't even the most shocking part. The kicker was that Nadia herself had no idea about this child, but Harry insisted the child was hers. It turned out they had frozen their sperm and eggs while abroad. Harry, in an attempt to tie Nadia to him, had secretly used a surrogate to have their child. Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins rushed over as soon as they heard the news. Upon investigation, they discovered this love child was already a year old. At first, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins didn't believe it, but Harry spoke with such conviction. He even produced DNA test results and a plethora of intimate photos with Nadia. Seeing his confidence, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins began to waver. As for Nadia, the moment she heard this news, she was a changed person. Despite her injuries, she insisted on seeing Harry. Anyone could tell from this reaction that they had been involved for some time. A DNA test seemed almost superfluous. The results came back quickly, confirming the child was indeed Nadia's. This was a disaster. Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins were utterly disappointed in Nadia. Didn't this prove she had been involved with Harry all along? With this trump card of a child, Harry's arrogance knew no bounds. Complaining about the poor conditions at the detention center, he demanded to be released on medical grounds. He was constantly asking for designer brands, and at the slightest displeasure, he threatened to take the child away. Although Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins were seething with anger, they had to swallow their pride for the sake of the family's reputation. But Harry's demands grew increasingly outrageous. He insisted on marrying Nadia, not just a registry office affair, but a grand wedding. This put Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins in a difficult position. Marriage? This meant officially accepting Harry as their son-in-law. From then on, he would be family. But the problem was, everyone knew that I was Nadia's fiancée. Although we had fallen out, the timing of Harry's love child was telling. It was clear as day that Nadia had been two-timing. Harry was nothing more than a homewrecker. I was at the peak of my career. If news of me being cheated on got out, Nadia, Harry, and the entire Jenkins family would likely be torn to shreds by public opinion. They had planned to wait a few days before addressing the issue, but Harry couldn't wait. He had long since stopped caring about others' opinions and criticisms. He was tired of this stifling life. Once, he had Nadia paving the way for him, helping him climb the social ladder. Now, he had to fend for himself. Seeing Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins' delayed response, Harry decided to go for broke. He immediately posted intimate photos of him and Nadia on social media, with the caption, "Love will prevail. Wedding date to be announced soon." By the time Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins learned of this, it was already a done deal. Harry's social media accounts were exploding with comments. Netizens had dug up videos of Harry's love child and his lovey-dovey moments with Nadia before the scandal broke. The evidence of Nadia's infidelity was irrefutable, and the entire internet was condemning the deceitful couple. However, these accusations seemed to have no effect on Nadia and Harry. What did two morally bankrupt individuals have to fear? Harry even brazenly hit back at the netizens. "Who says I'm a gold digger? Nothing matters in the face of true love. Love isn't about who comes first, it's about sincerity. We're destined for a lifetime together." The reckless actions of these two infuriated Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins to the point of near collapse. But the deed was done. After weighing the pros and cons, they had no choice but to compromise with Harry Lawrence's conditions. They knew this would invite criticism and damage the company's image, but they couldn't care about anything else now. All for that illegitimate child. They were willing to pay any price. Not only that, they also agreed to Harry's various outrageous demands, such as taking back the company shares originally gifted to me, sending Abe Jenkins, who had just been brought home, back to the children's home, and so on. I could turn a blind eye to other things, but regarding Abe, after all, we had spent time together, and I couldn't bear to see him suffer the pain of abandonment again. Although I stated the facts, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins still stubbornly held their views, insisting on the supremacy of blood ties. They even said that they had initially brought Abe back because they had no heir. Now that they had their own flesh and blood, they naturally had to sever ties with outsiders. This statement left me speechless. Not wanting to entangle with these ungrateful people anymore, I took Abe to my own home. My parents warmly welcomed Abe. Since the company was already under my management, they were quite free at home. Looking after Abe was also a pleasure for them. Due to this absurd move by Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins, Jenkins Group's stock price plummeted. The entire company was already filled with complaints. They unanimously believed that Mr. Jenkins was too selfish, and how could such a large enterprise be treated as a private matter? As the leader, how could he be so inconsiderate of the bigger picture? Taking advantage of this opportunity, Mr. Jenkins' cousins seized the chance and poached quite a few talented employees. In contrast, my side of the business was thriving. The deeper the netizens' disgust for Nadia Jenkins and Harry Lawrence, the deeper their sympathy and support for me. Voices supporting me rose one after another. 7 days later, Nadia Jenkins and Harry Lawrence held their wedding. The Jenkins parents spared no expense. Since they had decided to accept this grandchild, they went all in. Although the wedding venue was lavishly decorated, very few guests attended. Who would be willing to stoop to attend the wedding of an immoral couple? Rumor has it that after that day, Harry angrily smashed jewelry worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. As for Nadia, she even dared to send me a message to question, Scott Lawrence, you're behind all this, aren't you? Are you pleased to see me humiliated? Let me tell you, I will never love you in this lifetime. One day I will make you regret this." I was amused. I immediately replied, "Are you daydreaming or just deceiving yourself? Is your mouth specifically used for talking nonsense? I suggest you see a psychiatrist." After saying this, I immediately blocked her. 2 months later, I received news. Harry Lawrence's illegitimate child was not surrogate with Nadia Jenkins, but born to Harry and another woman. Well now, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins' plans had completely fallen through. For this child, they had almost lost all face and offended countless people. The company's senior management's dissatisfaction with them was about to explode. The two were unwilling to accept this and even suspected that I was secretly sabotaging them. They thought this was my means of revenge. I didn't hesitate. I immediately reported to the police, and the police investigation proved that I was completely innocent. The police also stated, all of this was Harry Lawrence deliberately forging the paternity test to gain the trust of the 3 Jenkins family members. It was entirely the Jenkins family's own doing. Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins completely broke down upon hearing this news and were both admitted to the hospital. When they recovered and were discharged, they found that the company had already changed hands. Mr. Jenkins' cousin had long been secretly buying people's hearts and acquiring a large number of shares. Mr. Jenkins' position as chairman was no longer secure. This series of blows made Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins age considerably in an instant. Worse still, they still had to deal with the raucous Nadia Jenkins and Harry Lawrence in the hospital. Ever since learning that the child wasn't hers, Nadia seemed to have become a different person. She would beat and kick Harry every day, and the two argued incessantly. Gradually, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins became completely disappointed in their daughter. After leaving her some money, they vanished without a trace. Where was Harry? After getting the money, he became arrogant and carelessly left Nadia Jenkins in the basement, washing his hands of the matter. And that basement Nadia went to, it was the very place where I died in my previous life. Later on, Nadia died. Just like in my previous life, Nadia starved to death alone in the basement. She had begged Harry for help multiple times, but Harry didn't take it seriously at all. Instead, he accused Nadia of being too delicate, saying she couldn't shake off her spoiled rich girl attitude. It wasn't until a week after Nadia's death that Harry, who arrived far too late, discovered her. As a result, Harry was sentenced to death. After the incident, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins finally arrived, dragging their feet. This time, after dealing with Nadia's funeral arrangements, they didn't rush to leave. Instead, they came to find me, or more accurately, to find Abe Jenkins. After the death of their daughter and son-in-law, they finally remembered the child they once regarded as an illegitimate son. Old age, physical decline, and consecutive blows made them no longer obsess over the continuation of their bloodline. But alas, Abe Jenkins was no longer here. Perhaps the elderly couple doesn't know yet, but Abe has already returned to his biological parents. He's the youngest son of Europe's wealthiest tycoon, who was accidentally separated years ago and ended up at the children's home. As soon as I finished speaking, I showed them the relevant news. Tycoon's youngest son finally returns home, the benefactor behind it all revealed. Grateful Tycoon makes grand gesture to support Lawrence Group's development. Scott Lawrence's legendary life, good deeds finally rewarded. It was at this moment Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins realized what a great opportunity they had missed. If they hadn't abandoned Abe back then, based on the kindness of raising him, Abe's biological parents would certainly have given them a generous reward, just like everything I now possess. But now, it's too late for regrets. This stroke of good fortune has nothing to do with them anymore. They could only mutter a few words about karma before hurriedly leaving. Watching the elderly couple depart, a slight smile appeared on my lips. In reality, I wasn't as kind as I appeared on the surface. I had known the truth about Abe's real identity all along. In my previous life, when I was hospitalized due to illness, the media had reported Tycoon's youngest son poisoned by enemies, starved to death in children's home. The tragic scene was unbearable to look at. Now that I've been reborn, I was filled with determination, resolved to seize every opportunity. It was I who deliberately guided Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins to that children's home. I even had the director specifically recommend Abe. I had investigated and found out that Abe had lost his memory soon after arriving at the children's home. But he was still very intelligent. For a child like that, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins would definitely choose him. Unfortunately, they were too cold-hearted and selfish, abandoning Abe for the sake of their own daughter, and I conveniently took him under my wing without arousing suspicion. I had already placed a good opportunity before them. It's their fault for not knowing how to grasp it. Harry's illegitimate child was also within my expectations. In my previous life, he had an illegitimate child too. Unfortunately, he hid it too well and Nadia never found out. But in this life, my appearance made him expose his flaws early on. I secretly had someone pass a message to Harry, saying that Nadia's parents had no intention of letting him in. He thought that by adding the child's name to the household register, he could be kicked out. This made him recklessly publicize his relationship with Nadia, not caring even if people called him a gold digger. To secure his position, Harry proposed marriage, demanded Abe's removal, asked for shares, wanted money. Nadia's parents could have rejected all these demands outright. But for the sake of their grandchild, they chose to give in. In the end, it all came to nothing. That gloomy basement. I didn't have to lift a finger. Harry walked right into the trap himself. In fact, Harry was well aware of how dangerous it was to leave Nadia alone in the basement. But he did it deliberately. Just like how he tortured me in the previous life, he continued to torment Nadia in this one. As long as Nadia died, the Jenkins family's fortune would fall into his pocket. I only called the police when Nadia was on the brink of death. Let him accompany Nadia on the journey to the afterlife. Later on, my career soared to new heights, taking the company to unprecedented levels of success. And my parents, they began, like other parents, to pressure me about marriage. They had planned out what they believed to be the perfect path for my life. I firmly refused, which my father took as a slight to his pride. To teach me a lesson and make me obey him, my father attempted to re-enter the business world, aiming to regain control of the company. But it was then that he realized everything had changed. His influence had been gradually replaced by mine. Many in the company didn't even recognize him, and no one followed his orders. My father, of course, couldn't accept this. He sought out former business partners, old friends and investors, but to no avail. After several failed attempts, my father finally understood. He had lost. I was no longer a pawn in his hand. I would forever be the pride he boasted about, and he could only live off that pride. This was precisely the ultimate goal of my struggles. The tragedy of my past life. Were Nadia Jenkins and Harry Lawrence really the only villains? Weren't my parents accomplices too? Though they didn't act directly or scheme, they abandoned me, destroying any hope I had of survival. Sometimes, those who stand by and do nothing are as despicable as the perpetrators. During those years lying in the hospital bed, I had seen through it all. If I stood at a peak no one else could reach, even if I couldn't move, no one would dare push me aside. Love, family, friendship, these would all eventually become illusions. Only power and achievement are eternal. After my rebirth, I never lost sight of my direction. Casting aside all constraints, I threw myself wholeheartedly into work. I wouldn't allow anyone the chance to hurt me, nor would I let anyone have the opportunity to abandon me. I wanted everyone to look up to me, to bow their heads to me. I wanted everyone to understand clearly. I, Scott Lawrence, am not a weakling to be manipulated, but a powerful figure who can control the fates of others.